It's a transplanted operating system for a sense-making mechanism for reality. We can actually start to orient our perception of reality around something that is fixed. In the infinitely expanding monetary system we're in now, we're trying to make sense of things using a system where the representation of reality is continually changing. So we have no way to properly orient ourselves. The result of that is a cascading waterfall of inability to make decisions, plan for the future, feel certain. And all of these things are things that Bitcoin fixes.
Bitcoin is not the end of the awakening. It's the beginning of the alignment.
The system is parasitic.
Bitcoin is aligned with this frequency of truth.
This is the aspect of Bitcoin that is unstoppable. There is a lot of bad information about Bitcoin. Once you've found the signal, you're set. But finding it is tough. Bitcoin is this tool that enables us to cut out the noise and live a fulfilled life that's fully present.
It realigns you with your soul's purpose. We're living in the future, and we're just waiting for the world to catch up. Today, I'm honored to be speaking with Scott Dedels. Scott is the author of The Dao of Bitcoin, a profound and thought-provoking book that explores the deep philosophical and spiritual layers of Bitcoin through the lens of Taoist wisdom. His book doesn't just explain Bitcoin, it reveals it as a reflection of the Tao, of natural law, of the invisible patterns that govern reality. I think you're going to find Scott's perspective incredibly grounding and expansive. Scott, welcome to The Signal.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
So one of the ideas that struck me in your book and that I've personally experienced is how Bitcoin becomes this mirror. Once you start anchoring to something real like Bitcoin, you start seeing the illusion of everything else. And for me, I'm a doctor, so I started seeing the illusion in fiat healthcare and in fiat food. And then you also see it in fiat media. It's like this whole veil gets lifted. Can you speak to how Bitcoin reveals these distorted systems? And maybe more importantly, how it gives people the clarity and the courage to start exiting these systems?
Yeah, I almost think of it like an operating system. One of the things I talk about in the book is the idea that money as a technology is something that we've actually invented to serve as a representation of reality. It's a tool that we use collectively so that we can have a shared understanding of the world around us. And in the case of money, like money is not the only thing we've done to do this, but money's job helps us fulfill an orientation of comparative value so that we can start to exchange things, store things, operate complex civilizations. And what I think Bitcoin is really offering here, to maybe answer your question, is it's a transplanted operating system for a sense-making mechanism for reality. How we make sense of the world is rooted in our understanding of how we think about what they're worth. It's a fundamental way that we have grown up. We think about our ambitions and our dreams and our desires and our stresses. These things are rooted around money. And what we haven't really connected, because we are born into the system, we didn't choose it. It's like a train that's rolling forward, and that train is the continual and ongoing devaluation of money, so that it's like running with a carrot that's dangling from the stick that's sticking out of your forehead, and you can never quite catch it. And we're all doing that. Most of us unconsciously. And that system is how we then arrange our worldviews of everything else. And so I think it's very natural how you said about medicine as a common thing in Bitcoin, that people then immediately relate it to whatever it is that they understand the best first, right? Totally makes sense. And like Bitcoin fixes everything. I think it's because what we're doing then is substituting one pair of goggles for another. And it actually is substituting like a pair of googly goggles for a pair that actually makes sense. Bitcoin is a sensible sense-making system. One of my favorite minds is Terence McKenna. And there's a really iconic soundbite of Terence McKenna talking about the world descending into nonsense. And it's like things will get crazier, and eventually they're going to get so crazy that we're going to have to acknowledge it and have a conversation about how weird things have gotten.
Mhm.
And I think that's where we are with money, where it's like we actually have hit a point in the last 5 years, say, where the concept of inflation and melting money is now in the main zeitgeist of our cultural understanding. And that's not how it was. We look like
Mhm.
we're the same age. I grew up in an era before the internet, riding bicycles. The price of stuff really didn't change in a way that was painful for me until things like everyone else, like it started to really accelerate in 2020. And so it was that I think really put a spotlight on how it's like a carnival game where you're trying to throw a ball at something where you're also standing on something that's moving. So there's this double degree of difficulty thing happening where with Bitcoin, at least, we're thinking about a fraction where the denominator is now a fixed number. So at least now we have a system where we can actually start to orient our perception of reality around something that is fixed. And this is the thing, I think, to sum it up or to put a bow on it, in the infinitely expanding monetary system we're in now, we're trying to make sense of things using a system where the representation of reality is continually changing. So we have no way to properly orient ourselves, and and as a result of that is a cascading waterfall of inability to make decisions, plan for the future, feel certain. And all of these things are things that Bitcoin fixes. And when you've experienced that fix, I think is when you can really call into focus your rational mind and apply it to things that you may have a lot of personal expertise on with a renewed sense of clarity. And if I had to try and distill what I would describe as the phenomenon that orange pilling really is, and like this is the thing, I think like it's such a miscast word because I think a lot of people think orange pilling is like when you understand that the price of Bitcoin is going up forever. What I think it really is when an understanding of that technology shifts your worldview and you're able to start really imagining an entirely different system and how you could apply that based on what you've already happened to have learned throughout the course of your life.
Yeah, I love how you say that because I recently realized that as well, that Bitcoin is not the end of the awakening. So the orange pill is not just figuring out all the flaws in the fiat system. Once you realize that's really the start, and then so it's not the end of the awakening, it's the beginning of the alignment. And that's what I feel, and that's what you portray so well in your book is about how once your eyes get open to this, then you can start aligning your life in all of these other areas. And it's so incredible for your soul to get taken out of that illusion and that uncertainty and then just have that anchor into truth. And it's such a powerful feeling.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. The system is parasitic. It
Yeah.
just is. And it's nobody's fault. It is somebody's fault, but it's not any of our faults. And that parasitic system produces parasitic behaviors in all of us. And that's the part that I think is it's really important that this what you're describing there, exiting from this creates an opportunity to really experience life differently. And that's the beautiful part about it. And I think it's like all right, I say it's an inward journey. I think this is something that happens first for an individual. And then at that point, as they start to manifest those behaviors and worldviews, is when you be the change. It's not just a slogan. This is how it works. It's something that happens for each of us. And then as it happens for more of us, the external world will change to reflect what we're radiating outwards.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I think you've got a section on that in your book about how our thoughts create reality. So what we focus on and what we think about will turn into this collective consciousness. And then once these ideas get expanded into the collective consciousness, it will turn into physical reality. So physical reality really starts with our thoughts, and our thoughts on an individual level are so important, which is why it's so important to realize how important our attention is. If we are putting our attention on fiat things like fiat media or doom scrolling, we're giving energy to that fiat world, and that's manifesting as this fiat physical reality. Whereas if we're conscious of where we put our intentions, then eventually the intentions will grow into this new physical reality. And it all starts with thought, which is such a profound idea.
Oh, totally. Honestly, we are all living in a giant shared instance of Minecraft. Like we build stuff, we like that's what happens, right? And right now we build stuff that reflects that thought paradigm that is rooted in the old system. And that's why we're progressively making crappier and crappier stuff that lasts less and less time and is less inspiring and beautiful. And that's just like one tiny segment of what's happening in the population. So to me, the opportunity to see all of these things really transform the physical world. Like I think this is coming. And I think that people, this idea we were talking about just a few seconds ago about it being the start of the journey, there are still a lot of people who are very interested in Bitcoin, talk about Bitcoin all the time, follow Bitcoin, but are really doing it from an old world view, like of wanting to thrive in that world. And again, like nothing is here to disparage anyone or like you're doing it wrong. But I think that an acknowledgement of how different things could be if we fix this problem has to come along with the commitment that like certain things that make the world work right now are actually going to have to cease. But there won't be a potential for coexistence or like for things to, it's not just a matter of swapping the money and everything will be fine again because there's going to have to be change that comes along with Bitcoin really maturing to its meet its fullest potential for change.
Yeah, there's this idea that Bitcoin is aligned with this frequency of truth. And once you hold it and once you move your energy out of the fiat world and into the Bitcoin energy, you start aligning with that frequency of truth. And when you align with that frequency, you can feel when things are illusions and when things aren't resonating at that frequency of truth. And then all of these illusions just naturally fall away because they're not resonating at that same frequency. As more and more people wake up to Bitcoin, more and more of the consciousness is going to be resonating at that frequency of truth. And it's just spreading. It's just a matter of time. But I do sometimes worry about what you're saying about how people still are interacting with Bitcoin and they're not really recognizing that it's resonating at this different frequency. They're still resonating at that fiat frequency. So I think it's very important for people like you to write this book and make sure that message of Bitcoin doesn't get lost, especially as people are not touching Bitcoin as adoption increases. They're touching it through ETFs, which is different than actually holding it in cold storage. You just don't feel the same that frequency of truth. You don't feel it. When you hold it in cold storage, you actually feel it and it automatically creates these changes. But if you're not really touching it, that message and that frequency might get missed.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're talking about is the energetic connection.
Yeah.
So when you're now interacting with a representation of Bitcoin instead of Bitcoin itself. And this is something I learned from Knut Swanholm, but the furthest extent of interacting with Bitcoin is memorizing your seed phrase. And at that point, you're actually like, you are your Bitcoin. You are the energy being stored in your Bitcoin. And there, yeah, there's a spectrum for sure. I think that's why I wrote the book. These ideas, and I almost like, I've said this to a few people, I don't even in some ways feel like any credit for the book because it just felt like it came through as a result of other things. It's this frequency of truth. And I felt very excited about being a person to be able to put that idea forward. But it's just an idea that I wouldn't even say it was my own. And I truly do believe that it is this aspect. And I talk about this book. This is the aspect of Bitcoin that is unstoppable. Like we really do spend a ton of time talking about hardest money ever invented, all of the monetary theory and the aspects of that that are the reason why Bitcoin is this unique thing and it's different. But no, I think ultimately it's that the default setting for a human being is hope. And we are wired for wanting to have this experience with the frequency of truth. We are. And I wanted to put out a message that maybe captured some of that, both for people who aren't into Bitcoin, but are into this other stuff. And I hope that the book continues to find those people because there is a lot of bad information about Bitcoin. Once you've found the signal, you're set. But finding it is tough. And people have just a lot of general roadblocks that come around money and investing and people think Bitcoin's an investment. They think it has all these terms that get applied to it from people who don't understand it and don't know how to talk about it. And then there's all this other crypto crap stuff that gets people extra confused. And so it's really a minefield. And I think that we all have an opportunity for people who understand Bitcoin to throw up the bat signal. It looks different for everyone, but part of it is aligning yourself in a way that will help others find the way too. And that is an extension of this idea of why it's unstoppable, because something that has like no recruitment barriers and is good for everyone who participates in it, and everyone who understands that has a motivation themselves to then go forward and propagate the idea. There are risks. There's always risks. The consolidation of Bitcoin in a handful of few giant custodians, total risk. Bitcoin being used as like pet rock by the biggest companies in the world, totally big risk. But until there's a point where there's something fundamentally broken about the way the Bitcoin core protocol operates, I think these are things that are fluid and it can change. And this is another part of Taoism that is the cyclicality of creation and destruction. So even the inevitable evolution of Bitcoin as an adopted idea and technology, it's natural and normal that it will have periods where it's going better and periods where we're afraid that it's going worse. Like that idea to me as well makes perfect sense. And I think like we naturally have been trained to have this like short attention spans and crazy anxiety about how things are going. And we want everything now. We're an immediate gratification society. So even to the extent of people hyper fixating on whatever the Bitcoin price is going to do like this cycle, and if this cycle's over or if it's a bit of this, that, it's like trying to fall asleep when you're like 7 years old. And the harder you try to fall asleep, the harder it becomes. And I think this is almost what's happening at a macro level among the people who are like really following Bitcoin and have like an internal urgency about something that it might need to do for them in the next 90 days, or how many dollars it could be worth.
Yeah, that kind of relates to one of the things you touch on in your book is you've got this section on Wu Wei and how that relates to Bitcoin. And that really hit me hard as well. Because in the Bitcoin world, we talk about hodling. And with Wu Wei, it feels similar, but it's like the deeper principle behind Bitcoin. It's about trusting the unfolding, not forcing things, letting go of control. So I'd love to hear you expand on how Wu Wei shows up in Bitcoin culture, especially in times of chaos, volatility, or fear. And how can Bitcoiners practice this principle more deeply?
Sure, yeah. So for people who haven't read the book or aren't familiar with Taoism, Wu Wei is a principle of non-action. And it's not the idea of doing nothing. It's the idea of doing the appropriate amount of effort, exerting the appropriate amount of effort that is aligned with whatever sort of energetic current is already happening. Trying too hard is a great recipe for failure. Not trying enough, everyone knows an equal problem. And so I think that this principle extends to how people interact with Bitcoin as they lower their time preference. Time preference to me is just inextricably intertwined with someone's like true understanding of Bitcoin. And so the longer people have been in Bitcoin, like some of the oldest Bitcoiners that I've now met in my travels, this is something that comes very natural to them. Because if they were going through some of the really, really tumultuous events in the early history of Bitcoin, they've already had their did I get shaken out moments. And they're almost like unaffected by whatever the news of the day is. Price go up, price go down. People like Adam Back. And like I love Adam Back. And it's just like watching a giant growing living organism for him. And he's aligned his life and his principles and values with this thing. And he's in no particular rush, as far as I can tell, for any certain thing to happen. And so that's the thing I think is when I think about Wu Wei, and I'd say for myself too, I store most of my personal wealth in Bitcoin. I don't have a price target. It's not really about that. Like I have a strong belief in what I think is happening right now. And that belief is actually just enabling me to go out and live the rest of my life without those things, without needing to overforce And it does go the other way. You meet people in Bitcoin who think now they have this sort of slow motion lottery ticket and they don't actually need to do anything anymore. And so it's to me like Bitcoin is this tool that enables us to cut out the noise and live a fulfilled life that's fully present, where we spend the time that we are able to thinking about the thing that we're doing, being able to enjoy the fruits of our labors, the times with our loved ones. These are all things that are taken from us when we are trapped in the parasitic system. And so for me, like even if I was unfathomably rich, I would still be trying to like work align with my purpose. And I just would be able to do it now in a way that is maybe like less stress. But I already have that less stress with an understanding of what this tool is now. It's just, I guess, how close you are to your own personal goals, like material wealth in the immediate right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful thing how Bitcoin has this effect on people where it makes you much less materialistic, forces you to realize that you were chasing things that you probably don't even really want. We get so caught up in this fiat system, in this fiat game, that we go down this path and we start playing this game that is not even a life of our own design. And we're chasing goals that aren't even really what we really want. So Bitcoin allows you to take a step back and realize that we're playing this rigged game, and it realigns you with your soul's purpose and just gives you the time and the clarity to now go down this different path. And it's such a beautiful thing to see people's lives actually change and their path just completely take a 180-degree turn or just alter just slightly. And it's so incredible because our lives are so finite and we don't appreciate it. We just got plugged into this matrix and we just go down this path. And that's such a shame to think that at the end of your life, you're going to look back and realize that you didn't really fulfill your life's purpose. And you hear that all the time with people on their deathbed. They look back and they think, why did I do all those things? This is what I really want to do. And I'm so grateful that Bitcoin woke me up before my deathbed. It gave me this whole new perspective on things. And now I'm taking a new path, and I see life as this big adventure with all these possibilities, as opposed to just locked in on this one path and being so confined to that.
Yeah. Our experience of the consumption of our finite time is something that I'm just continuing to think on. And I'm working on a second edition of the book that explores this topic a lot in a lot more depth. And how we see this now, I think like we price time is another thing that we price. And so this relationship between time and the energy that we spend consuming it and the value of that time is something I do talk about in the book now. But yeah, it's a really profound thing because in the fiat world, as money becomes worth less and less all the time, the energy that's consumed and the time that's spent to fund our lives, our pursuits, is being devalued as well. And we see that in the behaviors. So, how people's diminishing attention span, the pressure of how we spend our time now is becoming compressed. And I'm not sure that there's a floor in the fiat system for how compressed that time expenditure can feel. Like where we do some TikTok promotion, and it's if you don't catch someone's attention in 3 seconds in a TikTok, they're moving on to the next thing. And Bitcoin almost like to echo something that you're saying, I think it's Bitcoin actually has the reverse effect. So if your time is actually appreciating instead of being like devalued, then you have a different decision to make. And it's not whether or not that 7 second TikTok is worth your 7 seconds. It's do I really want to watch this 22-minute Netflix show or should I go hike a mountain? And that's going to take me 4 hours, but it's going to be 4,000 times more enjoyable than this dopamine hit that I might get as a. So I think that this is part of what goes on with the rewiring. It has to do with our subjective experience of the value of time and our ability to feel like we can store it securely. Imagine this transformation you're describing yourself. Imagine a world where an exponential number of people are simultaneously experiencing that subjective change in their perception of time. And this is how we get back to this shared instance of Minecraft. And we just now all of a sudden start to do things differently. Like architects are experiencing this change too. And those architects are going to start dreaming up different buildings. And nobody's going to say anything. Like it's not going to be a news story. We're just going to start to see the world look different. And it will be a cascading waterfall that affects everything. I think like you're going to go to the doctor and you're not going to have 15 minutes where they're 8 minutes late, so you only get seven. You're going to have an hour. And like these will just be the things that normal that are a reflection of a world where the ability to store time has been solved.
Yeah, I love the way you break that down. That was very well said. One of the most profound ideas for me was your description of Bitcoin as the spiritual bridge, something that anchors invisible information into physical energy via mining. And you said that Bitcoin metabolizes belief into reality. And I love the way you said that. So could you expand on how you see Bitcoin functioning as that bridge and what that means for the deeper nature of value, trust, and even personal transformation?
Sure. I think that it is spirituality for me in a lot of ways are tools to describe real, naturally occurring phenomenon that we maybe just don't necessarily have a full understanding of or an explanation of. And like we talk about energy and these things that could be turned like coined woo by skeptics, but this is Taoism is a very ancient way of viewing the world, the universe, and it's sensible. It explains things that we probably still can't explain right now. And so I think if we're talking about mining and what's going on with mining, there is a very like literal procedure unfolding with the consumption of electricity and hardware devices all over the world. And there's those many people know a lot more about mining than I do. What is also happening parallel to that very literal physical process is a transformation of energy and information into a money system that runs on human connectivity, human action, and energy. And that is also very real. We just maybe don't think about it in the same like ultra literal sense. People who want to be involved with mining, think they can make a living, whatever, are taking action to create better and better ways to mine. And as they're doing that, they're sourcing more and more creative sources of energy, inputs. And so this thing, as a result of the human incentive to participate in it, is like a living, self-improving organism that feeds on people's innate desire to want it to be better. And the input of the human energy, people's decision to take action and participate, like that is another input. And as they're doing that, they are connecting themselves to the people on the other end who just need access to a fair tool to store value and a form of money that actually functions. And so that's a very like reciprocal gift. It's a positive feedback loop where they get a reward for providing humanity with something that's incredibly valuable. And node runners are the same, right? So the node runners are like their only benefit is contributing to the group, the security and the decentralization of the network. And so it's a really beautiful the decision to run and maintain a node. Yeah, and the outcome is then more and more people learning about these ideas, using the tools to their benefit, and then teaching other people to do the same. And then you end up with more people tuning into conversations like this. So it's like a positive spiral to infinity. And this is why I think it's like when you really stop and think about what is happening, this is where I say that whatever we're pricing at in pretend money is just it's just not something that really interests me because we're so lucky to happen to be alive and that people like us are like we're alive and we're adults at a time where this incredible thing is happening in human civilization right now. We have an opportunity to be a part of it, to witness it. And like other generations got to be a part of World War II. It's not nearly, if you had the opportunity to choose, this is it.
Yeah, I think about that all the time about how incredible it is and how lucky we are to be living right now and to be able to see this. There's so many people that are alive right now that don't see it. But for us to be alive right now and to see it, it's the most incredible gift ever. You were talking about how a lot of people think that it's woo woo to talk about this stuff, but there's actually been a lot of advances that have been happening in our understanding of reality, like the quantum model of reality. So we've learned that actually the physical world is only 0.001% of everything that exists. So the other 99.999% is this informational realm or this quantum realm. And Bitcoin essentially exists in this informational realm. And that informational realm is more real than the physical realm. It's the foundation from which the physical reality arises. It's like that Nikola Tesla quote about how if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, learn to think in terms of frequency, energy, and vibration. And we're starting to learn about these frequencies and these energies and vibrations that are underlying our physical reality. And Bitcoin, it's so brilliant, but Bitcoin essentially is in that informational realm, and we've figured out how to pull it out of that informational realm and anchor it into physical reality through mining. So it's this bridge between worlds, and it's such a deep concept. And it's like you say, when we see it, we can see that we're pulling something out of that informational realm. This idea of digital scarcity and truth, it's an infinite concept. It's not supposed to have a finite value, but yet by pulling it out and putting it into the physical world in the form of Bitcoin, we're turning something infinite into something finite. And that's why we intuitively realize just how valuable this is and why we want to sell everything for Bitcoin and why we would never ever sell our Bitcoin, because we're owning something that's infinite. And it's hard for us to wrap our minds around that concept.
Man, like this is one of the things that I really struggled to find the words to adequately describe. And like I can, these are part of the reasons why I'm interested in going back and trying to tune the book because it's just such a crazy idea. And it's so interesting and profound. And yeah, but putting again, like trying to condense that to paper is something that I've just found really
Yeah.
challenging. And yeah, to your point about our understanding of the universe, like a photon looks like the yin yang symbol. If you look at it up close, like the clues are everywhere. And I think there's this, as Bitcoin is like recording transactions, it's also like transcribing that physical activity to the information realm, right?
Mhm.
So it's becoming this, it's almost, it's a representation of reality, like I said, but what it is, it's a truthful representation of reality. And the longer it goes and the bigger it and more all-encompassing it becomes, it's like a, it's like a computer game where the land is rendering in real time as you're playing it, right? Like it's becoming
Mhm.
more and more dynamic and fleshed out. And as more people comprehend it, this is what I think about this concept of collective consciousness. Like at some point, enough people will understand Bitcoin that it just won't matter. And not everybody knows how a car works. And that doesn't matter either. Like most people actually don't need to know how a car works,
Right.
and we all drive them. That's as an analogy, like part of where I think this goes. And it's like, for, I wanted to maybe just put that idea out into the book as well. And I could very well end up being wrong. We'll find out. But I think it's faster than people think. I think it's sooner than people think because of the way human connectivity works, because of how exponentiality works,
Mhm.
that this is like an idea that has been germinating for longer than people will give it credit for. Because I think for most people, Bitcoin kind of starts the day you understood it.
Mhm.
And that's not a knock. Like, I think that a statement applies to me too. Like, we all have a Bitcoin birthday, and it's hard to really understand or conceptualize that there are Bitcoin people that are older than you and what that time was like for them. And at some point, a huge swath of the global population is going to have this aha moment, and they'll just look at you and you'll be like, yeah, there'll be a shared understanding of what's happening. And when that moment happens, like it's like a binary event. This is the gradually then suddenly thing.
Mhm.
It's this is what awakening is, actually. When you have a transcendent moment on in a psychedelic journey or in breath work, it's a build and a build, and then it's something has changed. And this is actually what I think when we think about the collective consciousness concepts, civilization is figuring something out. Like our hive mind is processing what is for the sum of us a very weird and new and complex idea. And it's building. And it's building towards this moment of realization. And that's the piece that I think will surprise people by it happening sooner than people realize.
That is such a fascinating concept. I've never thought about it like that, about how Bitcoiners that see it, we've had that 0 to 1 moment. But what happens when society has that 0 to 1 moment? That is a crazy concept. And yeah, that, I agree. I think we could be a lot closer than we think to that 0 to 1 moment.
Man, things change so fast. And they always
Yeah,
like in anything we talk about in business is overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate what you can do in 5. And even if it is another 10 years, like that's a long time. 10 years is a long time to people who only are going to live 80.
right.
But for all of us together, that's a blink. And
Yeah.
we will experience that 10 years in a blink. And so we'll see.
Yeah. And there's this beautiful sense of acceptance in your book. And you talk about how collapse isn't something to fear, but something to understand as just part of nature's cycle. And that bear markets, inflation, and even institutional decay are not the end, but the compost for something new. So you've touched upon this earlier, but can you speak to how Bitcoin fits into this natural pattern of rebirth and what we might expect as the fiat systems continue to unravel?
Yeah, we have been really conditioned to feel that we can like artificially repress the natural cycles of everything. And some of the examples in the book are like plastic surgery or money printing through the financial crisis in 2008, too big to fail. All of these concepts have somehow we've arrived at a place socially where we think death is bad, and this is really not true of most ancient society, civilizations and cultures that really celebrate death and winter and are even in how in like European Western culture, we think of like funerals, how we process that
Mm.
in our society, where in a lot of other cultures, it's this very celebratory, a beautiful moment, right? Death is a part of life. And this is like a very fundamental aspect of Taoism, the understanding that night turns to day and then night again. Everything that exists naturally is procedural. It's a never-ending circular flow of creation and destruction. And so that we need to understand that we are existing inside that system. And so some destruction is good and it is natural and it is part of how things work. And that does also apply to things that could be providing you, making you feel safe or that you have planned for to be around longer than they might be. Like, I think that we've also been in this period where this is the longest, like excluding the conflicts that are happening around the world right now. This is like the most peaceful, the time since World War II ended has been the most peaceful time in recorded human history. Like this is the least large major scale conflicts that we've ever seen. And because of that, like there hasn't been any like ransacking of major cities and bombings of great capitals and like the physical destruction that would have been really normal throughout most of human history is just something that most of us have never experienced. And that's just like one example, I think, of how we've been conditioned to think that we're in this like up only, it should be normal, that the prices of stocks like only go up, and that our economies should grow forever, and we should stay young forever. And yeah, I think that Bitcoin has some of these like more rudimentary comparisons, this idea that Bitcoin goes up and then it does go down, and it has gone spectacularly down. And that's a good thing because that is in itself a reflection of how things naturally are. Inhale and then exhale and then inhale again. And over a long periods of time so far, that's what's actually happened. And so that's, yeah, what I was talking about earlier, where because we're still most of us existing in that mindset, it's a descendant thought pattern that I think really originates with our fundamental understanding of fiat money. This is why it's just so pervasive in how we think about everything. We think about how things should be using a paradigm that is itself unnatural and not intended to last forever. The average life of a fiat currency is 22 years. Most of us who are probably listening to this in the English speaking West are just also not used to that because most of the Western monies have been over 100 years now. But that's also a historical anomaly. And so I think that we should understand that it would be normal that these things will not be around forever. And it's also true, like this is the longest period ever where the global maps haven't really changed all that much. And I think for that reason, most people think like I live in Canada, that Canada, as it looks now, will exist forever. And I think it's highly likely that maps, and I say this in the book, will look very different in our lifetime. It doesn't make sense that everything will just continue to head in one direction in a straight line. Taoism is about this inevitable return back to center. Like the farther something drifts, the farther the recoil is to pull it back to sort of natural law and universal truth. And this is also a point I make in the book. Things could go a lot further, and it's true that the debasement of currency can go on for a really long time. But in the grand scale, the US dollar has lost 99.9% of its value over the last 100 years. We have to be just about as far as we can possibly get before there's a return to center.
Great. Yeah. I love the way you're breaking all this stuff down. A lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of this because you've got this gift of being able to combine the Dao principles with Bitcoin and apply it to someone's personal life. You're blowing my mind with the way you're breaking stuff down. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Honestly, like to say, you're making it easy on me. Of the
Yeah.
people who I've talked to who've actually read the book,
Yeah.
I can tell you really grokked it. And so it's cool. Just I do love wrote the book also because I love these ideas. And so I'm always thrilled to have the opportunity to talk about them because they're obviously like combining things that I'm passionate about.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about it is that as you learn about these principles, it only just makes your life better. So the more that
Mhm.
you learn about these principles and integrate these principles into your life just exponentially gets better the more you're able to comprehend these ideas and live them and really internalize them.
Yeah. So the more our money steals from us, the more
Mhm.
we have to go out and steal from each other. That's just true. And that's not anything malicious. Like that is just like that. It's that mind, it's a set of rules that we're given. And this alternative over here, the more people get involved, the more we have the ability to like help each other. Like it is just a much more energetically fulfilling and connecting, and it's where you want to be, right? Like yeah.
So, what are some practical ways that Bitcoiners and other people can take some of the ideas in your book and start living more in alignment with the principles of Tao and more in alignment with the ethos of Bitcoin? What are some like practical things they can do in their everyday life?
Good question. Maybe I just share some things that I think are valuable for me. And yeah, if someone were listening and finds value, then I hope that's helpful. I think that in Taoism, I want to say disdain, but it's not a priority to like really pursue material wealth. And if that's someone's choice, yeah, no judgment here. But I think that this idea of like maybe a point that we missed when we were talking about earlier about rhythms and cycles. And I talk about this book. Bitcoin's has its own clock. It's a metronome that churns out blocks and is set to these 4-year cycles of larger cycles. And so Bitcoin is doing something procedurally at its own pace. And if you can understand and believe in the monetary aspect of what is unfolding with Bitcoin, and then you understand also that it has a certain pace and cadence to it, then this is a kind of combining with that idea of wu wei. The current is already going in that direction. And if you're riding in a canoe and you're with a stream and you want to try and pedal faster, like you're welcome to, but you may not need to. And that's kind of for me the one key nugget that has actually been really valuable. I feel like the what I've been able to personally store in Bitcoin, I'm very confident, comfortable with the idea that it's going to arrive with me at a moment where whatever it is will be great for me. And because it has also changed the way I do live my day-to-day life and how I spend and consume and the things that I think about, the behaviors and that I've replaced with the things that I was doing before. In the world where your money is continually becoming worth less, there's a continual impetus to dispose of that money and turn it into other stuff before it decays. So you do need to either spend it on consumables or try and grow it, and there really isn't an option in the middle, which is actually what I think most people want to do with their money. Like my background is traditional finance, and our grandparents actually did just save money. Like people had savings accounts. And somewhere along the line, we fused saving and investing. Like it wasn't normal that 100% of someone's portfolio would be in the stock market. Stock market is gambling. Like you're gambling on companies and leadership teams and industries and sectors, but it's 100% gambling. And so now the money that we have that we're not spending, we gamble because we have to. And so there's a peace of mind, I think, that comes with the idea that what you're actually doing is saving. And you maybe a cool idea that I love, and I'm trying to figure out a better way to convey is this idea that Bitcoin transcends time because it is functionally possible to send Bitcoin into the future. Like you can, this is Michael Dunworth's time traveling Bitcoin, sending a Bitcoin in a locked transaction to a block height at some point in the future. That information, if you were to do that, is waiting for you there. Your body is going to have to travel through our linear understanding of time to meet it, but it's possible. And so it's almost like the fact that even one transaction of that nature has happened, that we have called into focus that future becoming a reality. Like that, there's like it's this like a kind of a quantum theory idea, right? Where we have magnetized a reality where that block height arrives, and at some point that wallet will unlock. So you don't need to do that to detach yourself from your sort of like internal urgency that I think is really deeply attached to the subconscious understanding that your money is becoming worth less every day. You don't do something with it. Because if your money is instead retaining its value or even potentially appreciating, then the only thing that you could feel rushed about is how fast it's doing that. And that's really a very internal thing that I think is worth pondering. And so for me, I have actually got to this point where I'm like, we'll see. There could be some really exciting outcomes and there could be some less. I'm actually not really married to any potential outcome other than Bitcoin continues to work and grow and do what I think it's going to do. And that enough fills me with the what I need personally to go out and focus on other things and just enjoy myself. Like it's this people have so much looming distraction and doom around trying to solve the unsolvable problem, which is like you need an infinite amount of more money all the time when money is continually becoming worth less and less. So if you could imagine a world where that problem for you had been removed, then you have really like a completely different space to operate in and can think about allocating your time differently, can think about planning for the future differently. You've really solved the most important problem. We're all actually already trying to solve this problem. And this is the thing about the spiraling collective consciousness towards the moment of Bitcoin awakening is we have been already trying to collectively make sense of this problem forever. And this is why everyone piled into Airbnbs 5 years ago and the 60/40 portfolio was what it was for so long. It's because of this What people are searching for is the Holy Grail, which is effectively storing your consumed time and energy in a financial tool that will enable you to convert it back into time and energy to be consumed at some point in the future. And so that's what we're really talking about doing when we can send Bitcoin into the future. We already have. When we're storing our energy in the Bitcoin blockchain, it's decay proof money, it's entropy proof money. And so that energy can move through information to meet you at some point in the future when you need to turn it back into something you want to use. And this is the big idea for me that I'm still trying to figure out how to describe.
And your thoughts about time and the future are so deep. I can't wait to read more about your thoughts when you flesh them out a little bit more. But it got me thinking about how, as Bitcoiners, we're basically already living in the future. Bitcoin is the future of money and of energy. And it's pretty clear, it's inevitable that Bitcoin is the future. So, as Bitcoiners who have already seen that, we're living in the future and we're just waiting for the world to catch up, which is a crazy concept. And also, your thoughts on that made me think of the movie Arrival, which is one of my favorite movies. It
Yeah.
talks about the cyclical nature of time and how time is not linear in the way that we think about it. And if you think about time as being cyclical, it really does relate to the ideas in Taoism, because if you know that everything has already happened before, it takes away that anxiety about what's going to happen. And then you can just relax into the present moment without anxiety for the future, because the future has already happened and everything that's going to happen is already a part of the circle. It's pretty deep the way that you were talking about that.
Yeah, man. I love that you brought that movie up. It's one of my favorite films. And the concept of the tech that movie's it's like the actual technology is the understanding that yeah, that time is nonlinear. I think it's such a big idea. It's what we're talking about right now though, right? Where
Yeah.
how you're to your point about living in the future already. There it's two ends of a string where as we move closer to that thing moves closer to us. The reason it moves closer to us is because we are already living in that future. So that future, the future is being manifested into reality. And in hindsight, it will seem like it always was obvious. And I think that's what they did such a cool job in that movie of showing how the actions that she was taking ultimately created the future where she was able to understand the language and phone that person. It was just they just captured a much simpler concept so beautifully because what is happening right now is that like we do know the hyper Bitcoinized world exists already right now, you and me,
Mm-hmm.
and we are doing exactly what she did in that movie when she was phoning the guy to talk
Mm-hmm.
about something from the future. That's literally what we're doing right now. And it will seem that way when we
Yeah.
look back in this
Right.
episode in 10 years or in 20 years.
Yeah. You also talk about this idea of reversionism, or returning to the source. And that's what Bitcoin is. It feels like a return, not just a return to sound money, but a return to sound living. And you describe Bitcoiners as reverse engineers. So people who are intuitively reading the signs and realigning before the collapse fully unfolds. So do you think that Bitcoin is helping us return to something ancient, like something sacred?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely do. I think that, and this is so, it's the principles of why this works are super old. And on bigger segments of human history, there has also been a very like rhythmic rise and falls of money systems and of civilizations. They're just on time scales that are bigger than an individual person's life. And so we have been living through a period of money being a certain way. And now we're entering into a period of money being a different way. And I think like we might be talking about 1,000 years. These are big, we could be entering into 1,000 year reign of Bitcoin. And when we're long gone, there could be some eventual something that causes it to revert and go the other direction again. And I would expect that should be what should be normal. That's where I think that concept, it's the rhythm of creation and destruction. It applies to 24-hour cycles with day and night, and it applies to 365-day cycles of the year. And this is also true of Bitcoin. There are shorter things that happen, medium-term things that happen. Because it's so young, we're still thinking about 1 year for a 15-year-old versus 1 year for a 50-year-old. They mean really different things. And I think we're thinking about Bitcoin that way. And so we're thinking about a technology that could become the basis for human civilization for 1,000 years. And we're worried about what's happening in 90 days. And this is something I think will prove to be silly eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for coming on and talking about all these deep concepts because, yeah, like you mentioned, it's so easy to get caught up in the price fluctuations and monetary policy. But what Bitcoin represents is really these much, much bigger ideas. And it's so important for these bigger ideas to at least be put out there so people have the possibility of being exposed to these ideas. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, they're bigger ideas than any of us, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think this we're lucky to be alive right now for this thing. And for Bitcoin to change your life personally, it might take more than 3 months. It might take more than 4 years. If you're just thinking about your financial certainty, and that's an important part of it. But there's something much, much bigger going on right now. So yeah, anyone who's listening, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And thank you again for having me on. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, I know you have similar conversations on your podcast. Where else can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. The handle is Lantern Bitcoin, and that's probably the best place for people to find me. And my message inbox is small enough that if you're interested and you want to connect, you can find me there.
Great. Great. Yeah, thanks again for coming on. And yeah, I can't wait to see what else you put out in the Bitcoin space and any follow-up books. I'll definitely be the first one to buy them because this book, got it right here, The Dao of Bitcoin. So anyone that is in the Bitcoin space and hasn't read this, you definitely have to check it out. It'll change your life for sure. But yeah, hopefully
Yeah, thank you.
we'll talk
That
soon.
means a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Take care. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Signal. In a world drowning in noise, signal is everything. Most people are overwhelmed, distracted, and deceived, not because they lack intelligence, but because they've lost the ability to discern what truly matters. But signal cuts through the noise. And Bitcoin is pure signal. It doesn't promise. It doesn't lie. It doesn't bend to opinion or propaganda. It just is. And as the world descends into even more chaos, distraction, and distortion, your ability to identify signal, to recognize what's real, true, and timeless will be one of your greatest assets. So stay sharp, stay sovereign, stay tuned, because here on The Signal, we don't follow trends, we follow truth. I'm Dr. Satoshi, and in a world of noise, we are the signal.